don't want to set the world on fire. I just want to start a flame in your heart. In my heart I have but one desire, and that one is you, no other. I've lost all ambition.
Welcome, everyone, to Greetings from Beyond Radio. I'm your host, Rich Valdes, and as usual, my co-host, Vickie Burnett. Say hi, Vickie.
Hi, Vickie.
Oh, she whispered it. Oh, she was so good about that, too.
Yeah.
Once again.
Enjoy it. Enjoy the one time I follow your directions.
Oh, yes,
Enjoy
I know.
it.
I have to relish in the moment, of course, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, I ask, where's Prince? Hello? There he is. Hi, Prince. Hello. Greetings from beyond. Literally. Unfortunately. Yeah. A talent gone way too early. And as usual, you can listen to Greetings from Beyond Radio and also see us on YouTube. But more than anything, you can listen to us on all of these platforms. Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, Amazon Music, the Paralinks, iHeart, Samsung Podcast Index, Listen Notes, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and Pandora. Although as of late, Apple has been giving us some issues because neither I nor Jen are owners of an Apple phone. Can you believe that? They won't run our show unless you're an owner of. That's another story for another time. But you know what?
Can you do it through me? Because my children have Apple.
Do you have an Apple?
No, I'm an Android.
You're an Android.
But my
okay.
children who are on my account both have Apple products.
Well, you know, we'll try that because, you know, we did find out, you know, I remember you brought that to my attention a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, why wasn't your friend able to see us on Apple? And that's why. You know,
Okay.
they apparently, they're very finicky, if you will, when it comes to having anything run through their system. You know, lots of people have been chiming in as of late, and I have to be very mindful of the fact that we have lots of people that are watching the show, and I have to name them off. One friend in particular, of which I happen to get along with very well and have known for well over a decade, is Chance Hancock, and he is one of the very, very, very few. Hello, Enchanted Boutique and Jenny Davis. He's had radio shows left and right. His latest radio show happens to be, I know it's going to sound funny, Paraprobe. Okay, I know, Paraprobe. But let me tell you,
Hold me back.
No. But let me tell you, he's a great guy. He's a great friend, and we've worked on and off on investigations left and right over the years. And he has a very popular show down there in Florida. I will be there very, very soon, by the way, in Florida.
Thanks for the warning.
Yeah, cute. And he's actually one of those few that has always had that radio voice, and he has his own radio show, the Paraprobe, and it's actually off of a radio station. And he had one of our guests last weekend, Mike Ricksecker. So that was a very interesting show. It was just 1 hour, unfortunately, and let me tell you, Mike Ricksecker's good. He's one of those few that actually knows what he's talking about. But we also have, you know, we're actually kind of lucky to have a very good host or actually guest coming up this time. And we found out just before the show, we not only have him for 1, we got him for 2 hours, 2. All right, which is awesome because this guy, I've always been a fan of this gentleman, and quite frankly, he's not only, the one of the best, actually, I think the best lead investigator for Florida. What was it? It's not Florida. I almost said Florida. It was Ghost Hunters International, although there is a connection there through TAPS. But he actually, once he got on there as the lead investigator, he actually brought more credibility to the show, in my opinion, because he knew how to apply scientific methodology. Also, a shout out to Philco_comics on Instagram. This is a dear friend of mine. I've known him since I was 13 years old. And let me tell you, you can find him on Instagram under Philco, Flicko, FLIKO_paints, and also comics. So Flicko_comics and paints as well. 2 different ones, but please go there. So with no further ado, I'm going to start going through the books. I'm going to go ahead and, once we go through the books and show everyone that this individual that we have on as our guest is not just great on TV as being a lead investigator for an international team. And let me tell you, they went to a lot of places. So let's start with book 1 and then move on. And Vickie, go off and read off the books.
We have Legend Seekers, Island of the Dead, which I have, by the way. And then we have Legend Seekers. It did a lot more going into the folklore and myth in Ireland. In the Mist of Gods. Is your home haunted? My home is haunted, excuse me. Now what? All right.
The Malice of Darkness. Yep.
Searching. Now I'm going to mispronounce that.
You, a teacher?
There's an accent mark on there. He can go ahead and pronounce that when he comes on here.
Yes.
So I don't mess it up. The Influence. Blowing Pandora's box wide open.
Boom.
The Complete Approach, a scientific and metaphysical guide to the paranormal. Building Cities of Gold. The Council of Three. Oh, my least favorite creature there on the front. And The Deception of Gods and Men, which I am currently reading. And let me tell you, I am so impressed. This is a book that you have to give your full attention to. When you are reading this is not light reading. This is not, a simple book. The concepts that he's talking about, all the thought process behind it, it's very complex. Yes, I know.
I love it. So with no further ado, let's bring on board the guest of the 2 hours, not 1 hour, 2 hours, okay? None other than Barry Fitzgerald.
Rich, Vickie, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it greatly. And I feel at this point I should also say hello to Prince as well.
Well, he appreciates it. He appreciates that. Rich is obsessed with that. A friend of mine actually did that. And it's an incredible likeness. So he always asks, for Prince to make an appearance.
Yes, I do. I do. Definitely. I will admit that. Barry, thank you so much for being on the show. And I've been looking forward to having you on the show because, quite frankly, as I stated to you earlier in the green room, I've always been a fan of not only yourself, but Ghost Hunters International. I felt that they actually broke new ground going international. Mm-hmm. And that's really what got everything started. Now it seems like all the paranormal shows are stuck here in the States. But when I saw that there were other shows that were beginning to break ground internationally, there's one that's come on. I know you're Irish, but with all due respect, there was one that came out, I believe at the beginning of this year called Haunted Scotland. And I know that they also have it's called over there Spooked Scotland, Spooked Ireland. And it's awesome. You get to see all these historical, I mean, places that have existed long before the United States being investigated by these paranormal investigators.
Mm-hmm.
Give me and all our listeners an idea as to, on episode 9, of course, an idea, what was the most intriguing place for you and the team to investigate, but especially you first?
Well, personally, for me, I loved the international travel, and you know, I've got favorite countries like Argentina and places like that just really resonated with me. But one of the investigations that we did, we got absolutely nothing at. But there was an incident that occurred to me before the cameras were switched on, which had a greater impact because I never got the answer until 10 years later
Oh, Lord.
about what that was. And that was when we were investigating Dracula's castle in Transylvania. So there was an incident there that occurred, and that made an impact. And you know, we've been around the country or around the world, Frankenstein, Dracula, Hitler, even in Argentina and Poland. And I think the closest that we got to Hitler, in fact, I think we got Hitler, was in Poland.
Really?
If it was to come down to it, if I was to say where was I would have said Poland.
Wow.
And that was through the processes that we used there to try and counteract the intelligence that we were trying to connect to, and trying to outwit it. And something did happen. And I was working with Paul Bradford on that particular scene whenever everything started to fire off, and that was a good one. But you know, I'm an avid photographer, and I absolutely love nighttime photography. I think there's a beauty in the night sky that we miss more often than not. So I tended to head into various different locations and take these beautiful night shots that would have been lit up with infrared or whatever the case may be. But in Wolfschanze, Hitler's Eastern Command post, that was one of the places that I walked into, and I got about maybe 15 feet into it with the camera over my shoulder. The rest of the crew and cast were back in a former SS bunker for the night, and I was walking through in the dark, and I got about 15 feet and went, nope.
Really?
I turned and went back. That place is naturally creepy. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so apparently something, I guess your instinct was saying, don't go any closer.
Oh yeah, they were screaming at me. You've gone quite far enough. That's enough.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
What do you feel that may have been?
My own instinct, my own gift of discernment, and I'm a great avid supporter of that. You know, people will ask me, well, what's the best piece of equipment that you can use? Really, if you understand your own biology, you are the best piece of equipment.
Agreed.
And it's unfortunate now that we live within this outer shell of paranormal research that needs bells and whistles. And unfortunately, the bells and whistles are locking us into the conscious brain. We're keeping connected to the outside world and watching for changes in meters and lights and things like that, and we're not connecting with this other aspect of what we are. We're ignoring. We're being locked out of that, and cell phones are another key feature which serve to lock us out. You know, we're constantly kept here in the left-hand hemisphere, and we need to shift over to the right as well and find a balance. The universe is about balance.
Oh yeah.
And we're considerably out balanced at the minute.
So do you believe as we progressed with technology, because if you go back in the olden times where the people were more in touch with things like fairies and gnomes and things like that, is technology to blame and us changing our focus in our brain? is that to blame for the skepticism and our turn away from the paranormal for so long?
There is a definite arc in that where we can see, but it's not only the technology; it's also the food. What we consume can also affect how that signaling process that comes through the body is activated or not for that case. And this idea of our activation, our gifted discernment, which we all have, can be interfered with. For instance, if we have a group who meets at a fast food restaurant before they go to the investigation, they have a half a gallon of soda drinks, and off they go. The refined sugar within our food can actually inhibit or prevent that gift of discernment from activating. So that what we're looking to see is this aspect of fight or flight, engage, and refined sugar can switch that off. So we're going into a place blind, and that's not where we should be going. We need to be going into these places completely corpus mentis, and very much aware, both on a physical aspect and also a spiritual aspect as well.
I agree. I think this, unfortunately, has become the distraction, the main distraction in our I can't say our generation, today's generation of kids, and also even younger adults. This is being used for investigations, and it should not be used for investigations. It's being used for EVPs. They're applying apps to this to actually locate ghosts. Last time I checked, ghosts don't have cell phones, so they can't be tracked. And I find it fascinating that they actually rely so much on cell phones nowadays for the technology, when in fact that technology is readily available. They don't even have a grasp when it comes to the scientific methodology that should be used, theoretically speaking, to actually locate any ghost, spirit, energy that may be around us. And they don't get it because they're waiting for the bells and whistles. And the bells and whistles, that can only go so far. I agree with you 100%, and I'm sure Vickie does as well, being that she's a psychic medium, that it's our internal, bells and whistle that we should be listening to. Agreed.
Very, very, very much so. Very much so. And it's amazing to see this switch occur, in which we needed these extra pieces of equipment, which many folks don't even understand how it works. And the fact, now we do see that there are occasions in which technology can be interfered with.
Yes.
And can be manipulated. And the likes of EVPs is a perfect example there, where you can have the answer to your question before you actually verbally deliver it. But that brings in another aspect in which we need to consider consciousness as well. This aspect of where we are and where it is. And so there's a whole range of things going on that we really need to consider. Never mind the idea of what actually are we communicating with, which, as Vickie has pointed out, I tend to point my finger at with the book, the Deceptions of Gods and Men. That really starts to open the doorway to get us to look at and consider what we're actually communicating with.
Yeah, I recommend anybody, especially if you really want a thought-provoking book. Now, like I said, I'm halfway through. That's because I have to pay so close attention. If it were just a surface book, a fluff book, I would have already been through it. But I go back and I reread, and as I'm reading it, I'm telling two people that I share a room with, a workspace. I'll be like, "Hey, did you hear about this study? This is fascinating." And they're like, "Yeah, okay." But there's so much research behind your book. There's so many different cases and different things that you have included in that you're tying it all together and using it's a fascinating book. Absolutely fascinating.
We had to, because I felt that the investigation, the investigative world of the paranormal was, I suppose, since the 19 '60s onward began to be pigeonholed, and I found the same went on with cryptozoology. The same was going on with UFOs, and this idea that if Bigfoot was to appear and a UFO was to appear behind him, the Bigfoot recording of that particular event was thrown out by the cryptozoologists, and likewise the ufologists wouldn't mention Bigfoot, and that was thrown out. And the same went for the paranormal as well, because when you have UFOs, you have a huge amount of paranormal activity. And that goes the same for Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh Lord.
There was a huge, when you had this activity that was going on, and you have your UFOs and your portals back and forward, there was also a huge amount of paranormal activity that wasn't being reported because that wouldn't have been funded. Mm-hmm. So the funding was specifically for the UFOs and this idea of alien intelligences.
What's funny is Skinwalker Ranch is literally, I mean, I'm in Utah right now.
Oh, very nice.
So yeah, just the thought. I mean, I've seen a few documentaries on Skinwalker. I've read a few books on it, and I just could not fathom the theory they had that this was all brought about by some voodoo high priestess. I'm like, what's a voodoo high priestess have anything to do with Utah? I mean, Utah is as cowboy as it gets.
Yeah.
And voodoo high priestess, we're talking Haiti or Miami, the southern region of the United States more than anything else. I'm like, how did that get all the way over here? This has a lot to do more so with the Native Americans that were indigenous to this area and the massacres that happened. That I do believe 100%. But they've even talked about Skinwalker activity happening more so before that massacre, and even more so after the massacre happened here in Utah. And quite frankly, I find that to be fascinating that people tend to want to stick to, I believe, the false narrative, which happens to be the voodoo high priestess versus the one, I'd say elephant in the room, which would be Native American, and that's the cause of it. But it's very much, it also brings me back to hi Olga. Thank you for chiming in, by the way. Olga, old friend of mine. As far as I'm concerned, I find it fascinating that they'd rather believe the false narrative versus the Captain Obvious. And people still stick to the voodoo high priestess. That's like putting an elephant in the middle of your living room when it should be out in the wild or in a zoo. Why do you think people tend to want to believe in the one that doesn't make any sense?
The false narrative, I think, is easier to believe, and I think that's and we see that today presently within modern or mainstream media. The false narrative is the easier pill to swallow, and sometimes we don't want to know the truth behind it. It's best sometimes we're sheltered from that. But I spent a little time out there in 2019 in Utah, just before we went into lockdown, and I had my experiences there as well. But the ranch itself is not the mainstay of all the activity. What we were able to do was to use our modern technology and identify these pockets of magnetic anomalies that coincided with these strange events across the board. It wasn't just linked to poltergeist activity. No, this was across the board into strange creatures, UFOs, and everything else. And the anomaly at Skinwalker stretches 80 miles, so it is massive, and people outside of that would be having their experiences as well, outside of the ranch, and the reasons why the ranch is having that problem, I think there's a good case for considering alternative solutions or reasons for that. I know that one of the scientists there was a key figure in developing technology that was able to hunt for heavy metals deep underground. And I'm aware that particular area has been, and probably still is, very rich in veins of gold, silver, and other heavy metals there as well. You start digging, obviously you have to dig.
Yeah, you're going to find something.
Rich areas. And it's an interesting perspective. I don't really follow the show, I gotta say, but I do know some of the characters. And it's interesting that from a Celtic perspective, that for us, we've seen giant reptilian snakes. The giant snakes were always a key feature in protecting natural wealth or heavy metals, gold, silver, and everything else. So there was always a connection there with us on a mythology aspect. And for the ancient Celts, what we see today as a dragon was alien to them. They had no idea what that is. It morphed eventually into what we see as a dragon. And of course, when you look at the likes of the recent movies there that shows, I think it's the dragon is called Snog. I think that's.
Oh, and would it be the Hobbit?
Yeah, something like that. Yes. That protects the gold. And isn't it interesting that the person that protects the wrench with his guns is called the dragon? And I thought, I'll leave that one just there.
Yeah, nice little nugget you left there. A little pun on the gold.
Yeah.
I've found that, yes, I would have to agree with you when it comes to a lot of these anomalies, a lot of these phenomenon that take place. They happen not on a regular basis. This is not like a haunt. This is a phenomenon that happens, and I think it has a lot to do with seismic movement beneath the earth. Mm-hmm. And it depends if there's been. I remember shortly after we had, and I was here in Utah when this happened. It was my first earthquake ever. I've gone through plenty of hurricanes living in Miami, but when I was here, and all of a sudden, it's the first earthquake in 200 years. And I'm like, well, lucky me, I happened to be here for that first one in 200 years. Yeah. There was a lot of paranormal activity taking place. Mm-hmm. There was reports everywhere. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Because I actually joked about it with Jen. And I said, we watched The Four Horsemen shall start writing now all of a sudden after the earthquake. And shortly after that happened was when the pandemic hit and everything closed down. And I'm like, I take it back. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Whatever gods were up there listening, I'm sorry. I apologize. But I'm telling you, it does actually, you see when there's a seismic movement like the one we had here, there paranormal activity. I don't care whether it's UFO, Bigfoot. I don't care if it's, whatever it may be. It happens. You can't ignore it.
Yeah. There is, just before the earthquake finally arrives on the surface, a huge amount of forces are being pent up just before the release, and they can be measured all the way across the planet.
Not only that, I guess we could call it an Earth, passing gas.
Exactly.
But it's passing paranormal gas, and here we are affected. And the way I see it is we need to really, really start paying close attention to these things. Because I actually discovered this 10 years ago. There was a massive earthquake in Haiti, and then all these reports of weird things started happening in Haiti, and I was like, okay, so there has to be something to this. And I brought it to the attention of a dear friend of mine and colleague, Paul Eno. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's been around forever in the paranormal. And he started noticing that there was activity after earthquakes, and he started making a mental note about it and writing it down in his books. So it's something to be taken under consideration. Yeah. What do you feel about this, Vickie?
I mean, anytime I think that you have a disruption in the earth, because we're all part of Earth and we all have to interact with everything in connection to Earth, it's only logical that it's going to cause some kind of disruption. And especially if you are looking at actual things that are found within the earth, like Barry was mentioning, your minerals and gold and all those kinds of things, if they're shifting, of course, it's going to cause this burst of energy that's going to attract things. At least that's the way I see it.
Well, we have our own energy field. So imagine the very energy field that the earth already produces affecting our energy field. We're going to feel it before we can even actually acknowledge it. Yeah. So it's only natural. And this is part of science. Science 101 dictates, and this is what's missing in the paranormal field, I feel, nowadays. We've relied too much on this and not enough on us, and also what has already been proven as being fact when it comes to science. That is what has been broken away from, and it's an unfortunate thing. I'm hoping that we start seeing more people bring back, like yourself, Barry, and myself, bring back the science behind all of this, because that is what we have. That's all we have to prove that what we sense, what we feel, what we see, hear, and experience does have a name to it, and it can be proven via scientific methodology.
I disagree slightly. I disagree slightly with that. Science is not written in stone.
No, it's not.
We make new discoveries every day, and we're constantly changing. Even medicine, it's called practicing medicine.
Yes.
Because things change and, new things come up. So that's where I would make a little bit of distinction in what we accept as science now may not be what's accepted as science later. And that may in turn affect how we view things that have been characterized as paranormal. Just throwing that out there.
Well, we have to have an open mind.
Very true, Vickie. I was reading a report there the other day. In fact, I have a book on the shelf there about, I think it was 75% of science that was conducted in a laboratory. 75% of the science conducted in a laboratory could not be duplicated. So it forces us to go back to the grindstone and say, what's going on? I think speed is our worst enemy, and I think the quicker we become, the more likely we are to make mistakes. And science, good science, starts with observation.
Yes, and
it's unfortunate that within today's society everything's quick. We gotta have it quick, and if we can't get it within the good old cell phone, it'll find the information for us, and we accept the first thing that's on Google first page.
So it's controlled environment.
Yes.
It's when it comes to science, it's you have to have a controlled environment in order to experiment with whatever it is you're experimenting, in order to get rid of all the distractions and isolate what you have. But the problem is when you're out on the field, much like you were with Ghost Hunters International, it's hard to duplicate that same scientific methodology that was conducted under a controlled environment in a place that has never really been investigated that way in any way, shape, or form. So how would you were talking earlier of that experience you had, and you stated that it was enough for you to tell you, okay, I shouldn't go any further. Okay, that was your internal, bells and whistles telling you not to go any further. But let's apply something else to this. Since this was out on the field, this was in foreign land that you've possibly never been to. What triggered it? What do you think triggered it? Do you think it was your mindset? Do you think it was the equipment you had? What?
I think there's part of us that cannot be measured. And that part that can't be measured is the triggering mechanism.
Gotcha.
To manifest into the physical, which manifests through the fight or flight. That is the seat of our instinct. And what we tend to see, and it's something that I have been writing about, is the 20-second rule. And what tends to happen is that when we have our encounter, if irrelevant of whatever form the energy appears as, whether it be a little girl or a cat or whatever the case may be, within the first 20 seconds, if our fight or flight engages, it's engaging for a reason. It's telling us to get the hell out of there.
Right.
What you were encountering is not what it is portraying itself to be. Now, the problem is, after we pass the 20 seconds and we don't acknowledge that information that's come through, what tends to happen is that this particular energy continues to alter our brain patterns, and we're being pushed into a theta band. And that's where we tend to have hypnotic suggestion, false memory, and we tend to go there a lot with meditation and things like that. But we're pushed into that area, and that then can switch off our fight or flight. Why is it so important that if we have something that is not there to do us any harm, that some of these particular entities, when they manifest, tell us, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You shouldn't be afraid. Stop telling me I don't need to be afraid. If my body reacts, if my instinct reacts, I'll goddamn well be afraid, because that's my instinct telling me this is not what it's portraying itself to be.
Sure.
And no matter if it's telling me don't be afraid, no, I will be afraid. I will react in the way that I'm designed to react. So I don't need to have something telling me don't be afraid, don't run away, don't do what you're doing. And we see this time and time again happening with encounters. Medjugorje over in Eastern Europe is a perfect example of that, where you have 3 young girls who were walking back, and on the mountainside, on the mountaintop, you have this shining being appear, which was later construed to be Mother Mary. That was not the case, because the 3 girls were stunned to fear. They were stunned to the spot. Their bodies reacted. And you've got this thing saying, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Well, it's too late. They're already afraid. The 20-second rule engaged with them, and their bodies, their instincts were reacting to that particular information. And so we have to be very, very careful with that. So at the 20-second rule, we need to have that extra sensory ability to understand what we're interacting with and see the other patterns that tend to appear when these things interact with us. If we don't react, then it's absolutely fine. I've always found time and time again, if I don't react to the situation that's unfolding, everything's fine. What it's showing itself to be ain't a problem to me. That's absolutely fine. I don't have an issue. And as I've always said, when communicating with this particular type of energy, if it's there for my betterment, it will not mind a few questions for clarity. But you can bet, forgive my English, as true as there's a hole in a duck's ass, when you start being inquisitive toward this thing and you say, well, wait a minute, something's not quite right here, it's gone. And that is a perfect signal. If that thing does not want to answer the questions correctly and honestly, well, then we should not be getting involved with that at all.
Agreed. You know, I really think that if everyone were to follow in your footsteps, and Dawn, I'm serious. If they were to fit, I think, you know, our producer has a great picture and example for us. If we were to follow in the same footsteps as you, and get ready for our investigations dressed just like this, I think, honest to God, we would not be running. Okay.
That was a tough investigation.
I know. And I'm telling you, look, I mean, you were ready. You got your bag, you got your hat, and I think that's a machete, if I'm not mistaken. You were ready to go or go. One or the other. I just had to throw that in there just for fun.
Halfway across the rope bridge at that point.
So I know that there was a story I came across where you actually went missing for a little while there looking for something. And I was it a city of gold? Was it what? I mean, Indiana Jones comes to mind when I read this story. I was like, Barry went missing? Looking for what? You want to share that with us?
There was a story that appeared in Wikipedia that I had disappeared into some type of portal or something like that.
Yeah. And was it a portal?
But no, that's not the case. That never happened. But I am, of course, always working with this aspect of portals and things like that, trying to understand what our ancients were doing with them, what they were communicating with, and more importantly, how they were activated. And I had some great success in Scotland last weekend at a location where we were able to ripple the surface of the portal, almost like tipping your finger on the surface of still water.
Wow.
And that was an interesting experiment that was conducted there. So, and I do a lot of work back here in Ireland as well into that particular aspect. There's one location, in fact, I was filming at last year, and I interviewed a guy there who was attacked in a rowing boat by two giant serpents. Ireland doesn't have serpents, but the old gods were depicted as the old serpents. And that in itself stems back into ancient, very ancient serpent worship. You've got this around the portal. You've also got UFOs that were filmed around the portal. It's a very, very interesting place, and it will mess with your technology to no end. Even the boat that I have that I need to access this thing through, it ruined an engine on me and everything else.
I'm a firm believer that portals do exist, and much like what we discussed earlier, when there's a seismic shift, it can create a portal. Certain elements that somehow merge together can create a portal, and I'm a firm believer as well that a lot of what we do see, these fae or fairies, Bigfoot, the dog man, the Michigan dog man, the Bray Road beast, which is something I've wanted to investigate for many, many, many years, are extra dimensional more than anything else.
Yeah.
And because they're seen, but just as quickly they're gone, which can only indicate one thing. They are gone from our dimension, our reality, into another. So that means they can shift between.
Yeah.
My thing is finding out when those appearances have taken place, and this is my old school. I'm sure you'll appreciate it. Is finding out if there was any kind of change, seismic change, if there was any kind of electrical storm going on, if there was a thunderstorm before, during, when these creatures were seen, if there was anything going on, even temperature, moon phase, whatnot. These are the things that need to be investigated. I like I said, Vickie and I and you are very much old school. We always write down everything. We have to have everything down because we need to know. Maybe it has something to do with said A, B, C, D, and on that caused this phenomenon to take place. Do you agree as well?
Oh, absolutely. I've got my notebooks everywhere. And I think whenever I finally head to the pearly gates, someone will go through my notebooks and think to myself, what the hell was he doing?
It's chicken scratch. It's the only, it's your own language that only you can understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, I know that I saw an interview and you were talking about the flight or fight, and you mentioned about dogs, and I think it was in particular with Skinwalker Ranch and how the entities really dislike them because I guess they couldn't fool the animals. And so they were able to pick up. So would you say in general, the animals have more than that 20-second rule that we are observing?
I don't think the animals are reacting per se to the fight or flight the way that we would activate. I think what the animals are picking up on, especially dogs, are the smell. There are particular smells associated with the phenomena at point of appearance, which will disperse within the air pretty quickly. But there's certain smells that the animals, I believe, are picking up on first, and the fact that the animals are picking up, they're alerting us that something is not quite right, of which causes great discontent with what is coming through, and hence they target the dogs first.
Yeah, I always wanted to for my team. I always wanted a dog. Like, I figure that would be like one of my best indicators. I'm very low tech when it comes to investigating.
Yeah.
I have my own senses, being a psychic medium, and I have a tape recorder. That's,
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. I'm not with the bells and whistles. Maybe
Yeah.
I should be. But to me, I'm not going in to try to prove to the world that something exists. I go in primarily to help a client. And in order to help the client, I have to know what's going on. And the best way for me to do that is typically through EVPs and messages. So,
there has to be, well, it wouldn't happen with just any dog. It has to be a dog that has grown to our customs. It has to be your own animal, more or less. And I'll give you an example. The last dog that I had, Max, he was massive. He was a massive white dog, but he went caving and everything with me. Boats, caving, hiking. He was everywhere. And in fact, he found cave entrances that I would have simply walked past. I didn't even know were there. But one particular cave entrance we entered, and it went deep into this particular hill. Now, this hill has some stories behind it, but nevertheless, we went further on in, and on one of the floors, there must have been this rectangular hole in the floor, maybe 5 feet by 2 feet, and it looked like it was dug out by a backhoe. Now, there was no soil, there was no debris around this particular hole, nor could you have got a backhoe in there, because I was bent over going into this, and it dropped down around 7 feet, and underneath that was another passageway. Now I looked at it and thought, I could go down that. It's me and the dog, and whenever I went to go forward to that particular hole, it was the first time ever that he raised his alarm that I shouldn't be doing this, and I thought, well, that's new. He hasn't done that before, and I stepped back and thought, okay, maybe he's picking up on something that I'm not. Obviously, their smell is much, much better than ours. And I went to go forward again, and again he did the same again. So I said, okay, I'm going to listen to this. This is a signal for me. I'm going to listen to this. And I took a photograph, and I can see the hole and the chamber that it appears in. And I've been back at that particular place. That hole is not there, nor is the chamber. The whole lot is gone. Not a cave-in. It's just not there. Now, I have the photograph to show that it was there. There's the hole. There's the chamber. It's gone. So this particular aspect of stone is something that appears time and time again, where a lot of this phenomena appears around stone, and either stone plateaus or cliff faces or cave systems. There's a lot around stone for some reason, which I'll not get into now. But David Paulides is another one, a fellow American there that has done amazing work on Missing 411, about people who disappear mysteriously within the national parks. And he has identified clusters of people that disappear. And he said the majority of these people disappear in boulder fields. And they disappear strangely. There was nothing left. And it'll happen within seconds. Gone. It's as if they walk through this barrier and then poof, they're gone. And for the majority, they don't come back. That's amazing work.
That's weird. I've never heard what you just said. Now I've never heard of that phenomenon. Where it was literally part of the hill, part of the stone, and then you go back, it's not even there anymore. Not even the opening. Is it covered over?
No, it's just not there. It's a stone face. I have a friend. He's an airline pilot there in the US, and he ended up on a hike with his friend, and they climbed up onto this particular plateau, and beyond that there was this cave system that they entered, and they hadn't seen it before, even though they had been in this hike time and time again. And as they entered the cave, their instincts started firing off. And they said, something's not right here. And they left. They said, well, look, we'll come back with better tools the next time, and we'll investigate this better. They arrived back. It's gone. This opening is gone. Again, we see this time and time again. And we've got there's video footage out there of UFOs even entering the side of mountains, which is a sheer cliff. You know, if that was us, we'd be smashed up the side of it. But yet these things are able to enter the rocks and vanish. They come out of the rocks. Volcanoes are a big thing that these things exit and enter through. What is it about the rocks? What is it about our underworld that we're missing?
What I find fascinating is the fact that it was there, then it's not. And would this indicate in any way, shape, or form that this was more than likely a window of passageway into another alternative dimension?
It could be, but that would be a very dangerous process to enter into, because we don't even know if our atoms would stay together if we went through to another dimension. We have no idea what that dimension is. We have clues. We have clues because the voices from the other world have given us those clues through various mediums. And there was an absolute amazing seance that was conducted in England. And it lasted for 5 years, and they set for twice a week for 5 years, and there were scientists queued up at the door wanting into this. Amazing results that they got through with these series of experiments. But one in particular was very, very intriguing for us because it mentioned this aspect of these things coming from a dimension very, very close to ours. And this is something that we hear time and time again, that it really gets back to that all the time, that whatever this is very, very close to ours, where these things are coming from and where the doors are opening to.
So it's like saying it's like right here, beyond this doorway, there's another room. And that's how close we are to other dimensions.
Closer probably than that even. Some say that the next dimension is closer to our skin than even our clothes.
Yo, wow, that's something.
So that gets really trippy.
Considering we really don't understand the dynamics behind how these portals open in the first place, what exactly needs to happen in order for them to happen and open up. It brings to mind Stargate. It brings to mind a lot of these different places that have actually entertained the possibility of going into different dimensions in time and space. So I wonder, and I've always theorized, I find it fascinating, although they're much bigger, that these what we used to refer to as fairy rings are very similar to these I forget what they're called, field
crop circles.
Crop circles. Thank you very much. But much bigger. Are we talking the same thing, just a different time, or the fairy rings that pretty much the same thing?
Crop circles is a very tricky subject because there are a group of people in South England who do make the crop circles, so it gets very, very tricky. Now, we do have accounts of crop circles appearing in Germany around 1850, I think, were the first accounts, if not a little earlier. So we know that they're not responsible for those. And it was interesting, the accounts there, they believed that it was the devils that were creating and damaging the crops.
Gotcha.
So it's possible, but it's also interesting as well that some of these particular crop circles are appearing irrelevant of whether they are manufactured by humans or not. They're appearing over England's natural water reserves. Now, we also know that the water that's dropping down through that is changing on a molecular level. That is also going into the water reserves of which we consume.
Fascinating.
So there are things that need answered there, but haven't been answered. Notably because we just don't have the funds.
Doesn't it always come down to money and funds? Unfortunately, it's a shame. I personally would love to go more into that, but then I start looking at my bank account and it tells me no. Next. I'm like, okay, I get you. All right, no problem. We have questions in the chat. People are beginning to chime in, and we will get to those questions. And we have a picture coming up. Actually, I'd like to, pose this picture up if possible, because it's a flashback. It's like I'm kind of living my kind of sort of young adulthood. Ghost Hunters International. I'm telling you, this was a great show. I loved watching it because it was so much more entertaining, and also the fact that you guys went to Dracula's castle, Frankenstein's castle, just to mention a few. That those are dream places, and the fact that castle is behind the actual name, that was amazing to say the least. But we'll be diving a bit more into this, and my producer's already telling me 5 minutes to go till break time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take an early break so that we have more time to actually get into Faye, your books, and everything else, because I'm telling you, I do have a running theory when it comes to fairy circles. So I'm so happy that you're able to stay on for the second hour. 2 hours of Barry. How can you beat that? I love that. But ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned, and we will be back after these few choice words from our sponsors. And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from Beyond Radio is honored to have Barry Fitzgerald, straight from Ireland. And we're going to be discussing fairy circles. I want his take on fairy circles, to be honest with you, because I've always found that not only did it exist back when, but it still happens occasionally around our time. And I think that's a slip into a different dimension. And what is your take? And I know you've written about this on the fairies, and whatnot, what we like to call elementals here in the States. What do you guys think about it, and what's your take on this phenomenon itself?
Well, the modern take, of course, the romanticized version, we would see our circles created by mushrooms, which in itself is fungal. That's the way they're designed to do. And will appear and disappear again, and was always, the modern take was, oh, stay out of that. That's a fairy ring and things like that. But that belief system in itself goes way back. The idea of reaching these spiritual beings through circle, and the idea of circle, of course, communing in circle. We even see that back in ancient Greece, and that, of course, moved into up into the uplands of Scotland, where it became known as kirk, and from there, then kirk became church. So to meet your gods, you formed a circle. And when we go back even further than that, prior to Greek times, we go into this aspect of the mounds, and the mounds formed a circle. And so the circle was representative of the sun. And these particular places are where you went to meet these other beings. And it was very, very important. And there was a very important process that was engaged during those times to meet these other beings. And they were really, there were no accidents here. You just didn't happen to stand on one by accident. There was a purpose behind it, and we see that within ufology and everything else. That there are no accidents to these meetings. There's always a reason behind it. We may not see it first off, but you can be sure that there's a reason behind it. And the fairy circle is an adaptation on that ancient belief system that they come to us through circle.
So do you believe these are extra dimensional experiences or extraterrestrial?
No, they were coming through to us.
I see.
Now there were occasions whenever people, according to the ancient literature, people would have slipped into them by sheer accident, and then came back again. But the problem is that the time on both sides is different. You have the world of the others, say, are on this side, and you've got our world on this side. Our time moves much faster. So if someone strays across to their world for, say, even a minute, and goes, this is not where I'm meant to be, and they go back, and they're fortunate enough that they can go back, they come back to a world that has progressed maybe 5 years, 10 years, or still 50 years. So that has always been a problem on that particular aspect. And the doors themselves, they usually were activated by them on the other side. There were processes in which we could certainly go and press the doorbell, if you like, and that always happened at certain times. For us, from our perspective on the island, these mounds, the ancient mounds, were orientated for specific times of when you were to enter these places and have your encounter with the gods of wisdom, who would bestow you various different bits of wisdom, and of course that progressed into the Oracle of Delphi, into that particular type of process, and then progressed on from there again. So yeah, it has a huge long history. I've had my encounters with the Fae, and in fact I've been able to photograph them. But there was a very, very interesting encounter that happened with that, in which I was standing in one of those ancient circles. In fact, that's where I was camping for the night, at a location that was active. So initially, I was these particular circles are built before the Great Pyramids of Giza, and so they're ancient. And initially, I was alerted to 3 kids or 3 teenagers who were walking up on the farther mound, which was about maybe 150 yards away from me, from my position. And they were wearing really primary color, like fleece tops, like I'm wearing here. And I was lying down behind the stone, taking notes on the environment and things like that in my notebook, as I do. And I seen them and I said, oh, they're locals. I must ask them if they've seen anything strange on this hilltop. So I finished the notes, but in the process of turning, I got the distinct impression that they saw me. And I put the notebook in my pocket and I got up to talk to them, and they were gone. Now, these kids were walking with large staffs and everything else. It was grand, they looked like anybody else, but they were gone. Now I could see 5 miles in any direction at that point where I was. I could not account to where they had gone, and I began thinking to myself, maybe that chamber is not collapsed. Maybe they've climbed inside. And I went back to check this huge rock formation. Rocks again. We're back to the rocks.
Mm-hmm.
They were gone. The rock formation had collapsed in on itself. So there was no access point for them. Yet these people climbed onto that massive rocks, and within 3 seconds, they were gone. And I thought, okay, that's a one-off. I messed up at that particular point because I had a camera in my pocket as well. And I thought, so the sun was already in the stage of setting, and timing is everything in these instances. And I was working with the camera because the problem I was having with it is that the flash was automatic and I couldn't switch it off. So every time I went to take a photograph, everyone in the local vicinity was seeing these flashes on top of the mountain. And I was afraid that I was going to have a search party coming up looking to see what was going on the very hilltop. So I was working with that, and I happened to look up, and there were 2 people walking away from me. And I thought, wait a minute, where the hell did they come from? Because I have perfect peripheral vision. Mm-hmm. And yet these people were able to walk by me. And more to the point, they had just walked through a flock of sheep that were lying down. If I go 50 feet near that sheep, they'll disperse.
Yeah, they would.
These people had gone through it. And I thought, what on earth is going on here? And I had a pair of binoculars around my neck, and I lifted up and looked. And I only saw one person, and I thought, what's going on here? Are these glasses broken, or what have I done? And I lifted because I seen that they were walking toward a cliff face. And I said, I must get a photograph of this because there's something not right about it. And I lifted the camera, and through the viewfinder, there was one person. Yet I was seeing 2. And I said, is this double vision on my part? No, it was not, because one person was wearing a slightly different colored jacket than the other, and one was shorter than the other.
Was it the same?
The photograph was bizarre in which what it had photographed. But what I learned from that particular instance was the reasons as to why they do not like technology with an investigation. Because they can manipulate the conscious, because I was seeing 2, but they could not manipulate the tech, the camera. So, and if we think back to investigations, when we're getting serious paranormal activity, a lot of it stops whenever we bring cameras out.
Yeah.
And they couldn't manipulate the camera, but they can manipulate the conscious, what we're to see, what they want us to see. And that was very apparent in that particular evening.
That actually reminds me of phenomena when I've been investigating where every person present audibly hears a huge bang,
yes,
but it is on no one's recorder.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That, oh, well, thank you. You just absolutely submitted and let me know why that happened.
As well, Vickie, you're absolutely right. The audible sense can be activated as well, along with the visual, or one or the other. Very strange.
So they can actually manipulate how they appear.
Oh, and have done for centuries. Yes, for centuries.
And so they appeared as 2 teenagers, and then you only see one off in the distance. Did it even look anywhere similar to what you had originally seen as one of the teenagers? See, That is amazing.
I'd seen the teenagers all right, and they were fine. I was able to. I didn't really pay too much attention at the time because I thought, oh, it's just kids.
Yeah.
And but the other two gave me the suspicion that they were the adults. They were the parents, if you like. But they seemed to control a lot. The first encounter was unusual, but the second now really threw me because it really started me to understand what was going on with our technology against what goes on once they link into the conscious brain.
But the fact that they can also affect our technology makes it even more difficult for us to actually record situations like this.
Oh, yeah,
and go back.
Uh-huh.
That's just, it almost that's why the pen is mightier than the technology nowadays, because pen to pad.
Yeah.
But oftentimes nowadays, unfortunately, we have people that we want to see. So they want to capture it on video. But when you have elementals like this that can actually affect not only our minds and what we perceive, but they can also affect the technology. How do we get around something like that? And even better question for you: what are they, and have they been around long before mankind? I think they have. Personally, I think they've been around long before that. It's just that it's a different breed of existence for them, that they've actually gone into hiding, underground, if you will, versus us, which have taken over. And it's an unfortunate thing. I'd like to find a bridge that we could somehow build between them and us to better understand where we came from and where we're going with technology nowadays. Agreed?
Sometimes I don't think they want us to know. There are certain people in certain levels that have got access to them because they serve a purpose. And I think that's a serious thing to consider, especially in the modern age where our manipulation is coming from. That can be very, very difficult as to what they are. That's I'm dealing with that in the next book, Beyond the Void, which has really opened up this. I've used the term before, opened up Pandora's box. And started to show me things that really challenged my own paradigm of what I understood things to be. But the idea that they have been here way before us is it's talked about hundreds of thousands of years that they've been here, and this manipulation has continued. And I just took a call today of 6 folks that ended up going to Mexico, and they went through an ayahuasca experience. Not my cup of tea, not my forte. I don't like the idea of purging myself from both ends. That's not a pretty sight. And even though this particular girl had seen these other people, rich people, defecate and vomit into white buckets, she ended up, she had this experience, and she saw this creature, this being on this other side that had long fingers and everything else, and delivered a very, very important message. And it should also be understood that these other people, the other 5 people that were in this circle with her, were not connected. So they were all strangers within this particular group that were having this experience, but yet every single one of them saw the same being. Wow. They saw the same thing on the other side. And the one message came through, which they had disdain for, is that we're food.
That's not a very...
That's not what we want to hear.
No.
And what do you mean we're food? Food in the energetic state, or food in the physical state, or what do you mean? That was never answered. We're just left with this aspect. You're food.
Well, now, it leads me to wonder, what would I taste like? I
have it on good authority, chicken.
That's the Matrix. Come on, Barry, you should know this by now. It's the Matrix. We, we have a question. We actually have several questions. I'm going to get to them, I promise.
Yeah.
From Eileen Jones, is it different to investigate overseas than it is in the U.S.? Like, is once more open to it than the other? What's your take on that?
Well, my particular aspect is, I've got my Celtic heritage that I draw on continually. We have been very connected to this particular island, and it's strange whenever I go to other lands that I noticeably detect the energy of that particular land when you're in it, and it's a very strange thing to feel. But I've had encounters in the United States of fae folk, if you want to call them that, and things like that. They do perform slightly differently to what we have here, but the principle is still the same. Again, if we go back to the particular mounds, the origin points, we see this movement of mounds from the east over to the west. So from the likes of Mesopotamia moving across into northern Europe and down through, and then we see that movement across the Atlantic, and we see the mounds appearing within those regions as well. The pyramids, the mounds, and the connection with the serpents. We always have that connection with the serpents.
It always comes down to the serpents,
the egg, and all the rest. And we have that. And the serpent worship was practiced much, much longer. Now, in fact, thousands of years. The earliest reference that we have of serpent worship is in Botswana, and I believe that was 70,000 BC. So the practice of serpent worship goes a long way back.
Yeah.
And relatively, the likes of Christianity would be viewed as a spit in the tank.
Yeah, pretty much.
2,000 years.
Well, we're talking BC before Christ, and yeah, definitely. We have another question from Beth Watson, good friend of ours. I think about the times we have caught something on camera in real time, then go back to review it, and when we play it, it's just snow.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I've had that happen to me. I know Vickie has. I'm sure, lost footage that should have been there and it wasn't there. How many times have you had to deal with this? And I think whatever it is we're dealing with, it definitely, like you said earlier, it can affect what we see, what we perceive, but it can also affect our technology as well. How many times have you gone through that in your experience, vast experience when it comes to this?
Yeah, that'll happen. And in fact, while people were watching that particular screen, yes, that manipulation can go on, as you rightly pointed out, that we see it. Yet when we go back, the technology is saying, but it's not there.
Yeah.
And so that manipulation can very easily appear. Now, I devised a camera to mimic a child's eye. I was very, very intrigued about how children were seeing the phenomena. And there were several things going on with children that we needed to understand. And in principle, up until the age of about 4, a child will predominantly be in theta band. Its dominant band will be theta. So that's already in that particular state in which it can interact and do what it does spiritually. And we see that at a young age. We'll be sitting with the children, and then all of a sudden they look up and they watch something that we can't see.
Right.
And so they're in that particular mind state as it is. But that changes after around 4 years of age. But between the ages of 7 and 13, there is also a filter that thickens over the eye that narrows our perspective and appreciation of the electromagnetic field, the visionary field, if you like. So the infrared and the ultraviolet narrow. So what I wanted to do was devise a camera, first off, and this is one I had made earlier.
Very cool.
Small little camera, but it utilizes the light that's already there, so it doesn't disturb the environment. That was very, very important. So it doesn't. Number one, it observes the environment by not disturbing it. but it also has a greater band of appreciation of that spectrum. And we ended up, we investigated this castle in England, and we spoke to the caretaker there, and he had said that he felt that he was haunted, that the spirits of the castle were haunting him. And we went into the basement, and there was this wall, part of the wall that was knocked out. I had no idea why. It looked like someone had been in with a pickaxe and hooking the stones out. And I asked him what was going on there, and he says, "Oh, I don't know what it is." But we set up the camera, we started recording him. Nothing happened while he was there. It happened when he left. And what was interesting is that this particular anomaly appeared on screen. It didn't detect the camera that was there, and it produced its own beam of light down against this wall that was already being examined, and it was looking for something on the wall, like someone else had been there looking for something in the wall. We never found out what was in the wall, but it was interesting that we were able to suggest to the guy, we don't think it's you that has the problem. We think it's the castle. There's something here attracting this phenomena to the castle.
Do you think it was spiritual in nature, or do you think it was fae? What did you theorize?
Well, no, that's very complicated, especially whenever you start getting into titles.
Yeah.
And I don't tend to deal with titles anymore. I see those as masks, and the problem is when you try and follow the phenomena via the mask, you don't get too far until you hit a brick wall. So on a research perspective, you'll get back maybe 200 years, and then bang, that's the end of it. That's the last that particular mask has been seen, and that mask can change sometimes twice in a generation, in which it wishes to be depicted and understood as. But the one way that I was able to track it was by the phenomena in which it interacted with us on, and that I was able to push back into the Middle East, and also understanding what we're calling in was another key factor, and to understand the history of this particular phenomena. And if we consider the likes of, and this would be an uncomfortable truth for many, if we look at this aspect of guardian angels, the angel cult is big these days. What exactly are angels? Where did they come from? A guardian angel in itself originates from the Roman perspective of genius. If someone was good with the arts, if they were good with literature, if they were good with paintings, they were seen as listening to their genius, something which was outside the body. But in modern day, we use that term as something which is internal. We have internalized genius when originally it was seen as outside. Genius then manifests, when we go back further, genius manifests into genii, jinn from the Middle East, daemon, and in fact before daemon, demon, and then daemon, and you keep going back further and further and further, and you're able to track this arc of the phenomena coming down around. And the fairy are also in there. They're part of the daemon realm.
Look at that.
Title.
I find that fascinating because, it depends on the person's perception.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what may manifest to them, because if you're already perceiving or expecting to find something, let's say fae, let's say an angel, let's say a spirit, a ghost, anything, that's what it's going to come across as.
Mm-hmm.
And more than likely you are boxing yourself in by doing so. So maybe the approach we take should be different and be open to whatever.
Yep.
Instead of asking the question, are you an angel? Are you this? Are you that? Just say, I'm here. You have any questions for me? I have questions for you. Let's communicate. And then based off of the symptoms, I'd like to call them symptoms, or what you experience, that leads you to, oh, this must be a jinn, fae, angel, whatever may be what you perceive as to categorize.
Absolutely, but remember that all of those masks all end up in the
Yes.
same well. So that's something to remember, that we have multifaceted titles here, but they're all ending up in the same pool. So that was a big thing to work through.
Yeah, and I've noticed, because I'm one of the people that I would consider myself very fortunate that I have had experience and I'm able to see what we refer to, like Rich said, as elementals, or I like to call them nature spirits.
Yeah.
It's I've often come across them. You talk a lot about deception, and it's in the title of your newest
Yeah.
book. When I first come across them, I don't have any preconceived notions of what they might be, but they'll often depict themselves. First, they always try to scare, and
Yes.
they try to appear bigger and bolder than what they are. And then when I don't flee, and when I say, okay, show me who you really are, then I get what I feel is a more realistic image of what they actually are. Do you think that once you have established relationships with certain types of entities, that relationship will echo no matter where you go? For example, I'm here in Florida, but let's say I were to go to Ireland. Do you
Yeah.
think the relationship that I've established with them here would carry over to another country?
Yes, it should do. It should work. It should work there fine, and I don't have any issue with that, because I've seen that work in practice. That will carry over, but it's just, if we drop the masks, if we say we stopped accepting the masks and dealt with the phenomena in which it interacts with us, then I think there's greater value there in seeing the phenomena on a greater scale. There was a case there in Brazil that I was following, and it was a poltergeist case. And within the house, beds were exploding into flames, wardrobes were just they were creating these terrible fires in the property. But it was witnessed by police officers who had gone in to rescue the children. And there was one interesting point that was raised at this particular case, because there was a sound that was heard by the children, and they said it wasn't our dog, it was another dog that was baying outside the window. Now, people mightn't understand that particular term, baying. Dogs when in a pack will bay to attract attention, to prey. So the phenomena was going off within the house, and the people were saying, "Oh, it must be the kids. It's their phenomena and all the rest." As this other activity was outside the property, calling in others, and then we start looking at this association with dogs, and this representation of phenomena. Again, we see crossing over into other areas, in other fields, dog men being one particular perspective. And we see this aspect of dogs and preying dogs and hunting dogs, and all the rest. In fact, these entities hunting in packs, and that is something to keep in mind with the phenomena, that we have to establish, and establish pretty quickly what we're dealing with, because as Vickie says in the title of the book, the deception is high, and as I said before at the beginning of the show, if the spirit is there, if the entity, if the energy, whatever you want to call it, is there for our betterment, they will not mind a few questions for clarity.
Good point. I see where you're heading with this, because oftentimes you see a phenomenon like what you just discussed taking place, and old school, back in the day, poltergeist activity was considered to surround children that were going through adolescence.
Yeah.
And then even before that, further back, they were connected with fae, brownies, to be more precise. And they were the ones that were the tricksters and would do this. Nowadays, poltergeist is a word I feel is being thrown around a lot, and there's no connection to any one particular person. It's actually being connected directly, immediately to the spirit that's there. And I think that's a mistake. When you stop looking and you're just looking at one cause, but you're not looking at all the other possibilities. And throwing in the baying dog, there in itself, where'd that come from as well? Does that have something to do with this as well? When you close your mind to the possibility of all the other things, cause and effect, you close yourself off to what is really the cause of everything going on here.
Well, the types of if we go and we look at the broad scheme of things again, you've got ufology, you've got all these other different aspects, these key points within the field. All of them, and this is quite a sobering thing to understand, all of the phenomena can be summoned. And I mean that from an esoteric perspective, that can all be summoned. So we're not looking at something which is nuts and bolts anymore. We're looking at something that is coming from this other pool, this other place. And can be summoned. I've stood in the backyard of this house and have done the CE5 thing and used the laser light into the sky. And these things will reply back until I made that connection with them and I said, what do you want? And I give them two options. Either come down and tell me what you want, or I'll keep it clean. F off. And they went away.
Look at that. It's a matter of communication and how you come across to them. I think it's the energy putting out that you're putting out yourself, and they will be either receptive to it or not. But then we have to go back to that 20-second window, and should we engage? Because if we do, they're gone. But there's also the possibility they may stick around. So that's where you have to gain control of yourself when you yourself are.
Yes, you have to do that. And there's a lot of the phenomena. In fact, all again of this fringe research, we see all of it also manifest how we attribute a defense mechanism from our perspective is that all of it is affected by iron. You can wear an iron amulet, and the energy itself will not manifest around you while you wear iron. And that goes for gray aliens that enter your bedroom. That goes for the incubus and succubus. All of that will stop if you're wearing an iron amulet. Why is that? Why doesn't that also connected?
Doesn't that also run for Fae as well?
Yes. And now you're starting to see this greater connection. Yeah.
Okay.
And when we consider the likes of the incubus and succubus attacks that go back thousands of years, 9 times out of 10 they'll attack women more than men. They attack women when they enter their monthly cycles. They become anemic. They're low in iron. So the door to attack is the iron. And the same goes for the grey as well. I've seen that work and be very fortunate to see that work for myself.
I never thought of it that way, but you know what? You're right. It's true. I'm definitely going to be looking for something iron to wear. And I'm going to recommend this to all our viewers and Vickie and Jen. I quite frankly, I never thought of it that way, but you do have a good point there. I never thought of. Vickie, what's your viewpoint on this now?
I'm wondering, this may not be tied in at all, but as an investigator, I've had team members that I used to call paranormal repellent. Could it be that they have a higher iron content in their body or something?
Yes, and if they're more critical of what they're being told, they don't like that particular style of energy that comes through. Does not like critical thinkers. They won't entertain with critical thinkers because we call it out, and it has no wish to be called out.
Well, I'm definitely one that calls out, and I still have enough. I gather enough evidence, but there's certain people that I literally call them repellent, and so that really makes me think they need to stay off the spinach before the investigation.
Jen, our producer, is saying I'm taking more iron pills now. We started a trend. Hashtag iron pills. Okay. I never thought of it that way. And I'm like I say, if you go a day without learning something new, then you've pretty much, missed a day in your life. I just learned something new. Thank you. It's something I never really thought of because, yes, I've always known iron is a repellent when it comes to Fae, but you are correct. If it's a repellent for Fae, and it also happens to be a repellent for alien abduction, for and visitation, for incubus, succubus, and other spirits, jinn as well. Yep. That's something that needs to be taken under consideration. And wow, we just hit a milestone right here in Greetings from Beyond Radio. Iron is our friend, because if we don't want to be visited or probed, if you know what I mean, and I'm trying to keep it PG here, keep iron near you at all times, and be Iron Man. Be Iron Man or Iron Woman, and just keep it on you at all times. So,
well, you've also spoken about the use of IR lights and the level of IR lights and how that affects people. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, during the investigations, I was able to see with the experiments that I had done that you have two sides of the spectrum in which we're in the middle, and if you're using infrared lights, which we use night vision cameras, that can interfere with the higher manifestation coming through the ultraviolet. And what has been put to us is that it reacts to their manifestation like acid would to our skin. So that use of IR light is damaging actually during an investigation if we intend to reach higher aspects of that particular realm, and likewise vice versa. If we use ultraviolet light within a room or a house that's being disturbed, you will create a safe room because the lower aspects will not manifest in ultraviolet light. Now, that's not a permanent solution by any means, but what it does is it gives the family a respite at that particular moment. And what we saw, and certainly during filming of GHI, I had great guys that were filming with us, and I asked them time and time again, can you dial down the infrared to allow that other aspect to come in? We also see within.
You saw I had my pencil taking notes.
Yeah, and I heard you
look
writing,
on your own paper.
I'm taking
eyes
notes
on your own paper.
Professor Barry Fitzgerald
I'm right. See,
I'm telling you. I mean, good Lord, Barry, thank you so much. I mean, we're learning so much from you. You should be a professor if you're not yet. But
there are cameras available on eBay and things like that claim to be full spectrum cameras, and they've got these huge banks of lights on them as well. The lights are damaging the environment. Those are not full spectrum cameras by any means. They're not designed for what the full spectrum analogy was meant to be for. So they're absolutely useless. But yeah, there are various different types of technology that can help with that. Now, in regards to, I know that I was slightly damaged or damning to the modern take on paranormal investigating with bells and whistles, but there are some things out there that can help in regards to technology, and Vickie, this is something that may interest you, because there's a particular, I think I have it written on the board there. Yeah, the binding factor. The binding factor is a 40 hertz signal that begins at the thalamus within the brain. And this operates during waking hours. So every 40 times a second, this pulse emits from the thalamus and rolls over the top of the brain and into the back of the head. So 40 times a second. That is locking in our psychic ability. So during daylight hours, we're inhibited by this binding factor, and it's a term used within what the hell do they call it? Neuroscience. There it is. So there's that to understand, and when we sleep, that binding factor stops. The signal is stopped during sleep, and boom, we're gone. We go and we shoot to the astral planes and everything else, and we do our things. But there is technology there that can actually, during our waking hours, can inhibit the binding factor. There are plans on the internet for folks to look at and build their own machine that does this and switches it off. And it is shown that even people who don't possess any skill whatsoever will begin having immediate effect.
And right here, just so you can see for yourself, from Beth Watson. You know, you've started a trend here. You're trending, Barry. This is good. Keep going. Sorry for the interruption. I'm writing.
But yeah, so that's the aspect of the binding factor is certainly something there that really is worth looking at and has been researched as well. So that technology there is very, very useful.
You know what I've discovered is that people that usually, and it takes rapid eye movement, REM, to happen, is when they most experience paranormal anomalies or phenomenon. And I believe that's because they tend to go into a more trance state. They're so deep in sleep and their natural defenses are down that's when they experience those things the most. And I think that's when they come through, because they can either communicate or attack, one or the other, and preferably communicate if it's something good. But the attack part always comes at REM state. Have you found that to be coincidence or something that just it's just the way they communicate? When I say they, I mean anything.
Yeah. No, there is a precedent there for REM state being a key factor within a lot of this phenomena. And there was a study done during the lockdown years, 2021, and in Europe there was a phenomenon known as pandemic dreaming appeared, and that particular occurrence began happening when people were working from home. So now we were in a situation in which we weren't being woken up out of our dream cycle by an alarm. People were waking up naturally. They were exiting their dream state naturally, and they were having these prophetic dreams. And they became known as pandemic dreaming. And that was because of the rapid eye movement and everything else. We entered the last stage in which we had the dreams which we could remember, until they, of course, disappear in daylight hours. But a lot of the dreams were it wasn't good. It was very prophetic, but it wasn't good. It wasn't snowmen or anything like that.
Well, considering what was going on at the time during the pandemic, everyone was afraid for their lives and catching this horrible. And it's still, we're not on lockdown, but we still have that in the back of our minds. This is a global pandemic. Naturally, people, and you're right, we are creatures of habit. We're used to having a routine. It's only when that routine is interrupted, much like what happened with the pandemic. People all of a sudden, they couldn't go to work. They didn't have an alarm clock to wake them up, and their body started reacting because it was in constant fear that if they go outside, if they breathe the air, if they come in contact with someone or something, they could catch this, and they'd be the next number projected out there as dead. I find that fascinating that it actually has a name. It's a phenomenon. I don't even know if we should call it a phenomenon. I think if anything, it's just something that maybe our bodies as human beings naturally produced during this pandemic time. And we're still going through it, but it's not as bad as it was in 2020 and 2021. But now that people are getting back to work, and there's even more, and I've noticed this, there's more people working from home. Companies have noticed that it's more cost efficient to not have to pay for an office and rent you know what I mean, and light and whatnot, just keep them home, work through the computer. It's a lot cheaper. And you know what? I think that may be causing more issues for us as the human species, because we now have to transition from waking up in the morning to an alarm clock, getting dressed, go to work, come back. Routine has been broken. Now this, if you want to call it a phenomenon, is happening.
Yeah, but you also have this awakening that is now
Yes.
occurring. And is that awakening occurring because we were allowed to go through the prophetic dreaming?
Vickie, your take on this, because this is getting
very,
very interesting now.
It's the chicken and the egg thing, I guess.
Yeah, I know.
It really and that's what I'm telling you. His book, when you read this latest book, you really have to think and you have to pay attention, because when you start going down all these different rabbit holes, you learn so much. And I have a feeling haven't gotten to the end, but I have a feeling it's all going to come down to.
You're going to be rereading it.
I am. I'm going to have to read this more than once, because I really want to make sure I get a full understanding. But, I remember a lot of people came to me during the pandemic and they said, hey, I've noticed a lot more activity in my home. I didn't have activity before. And I said, everybody's emotions are high. There's a lot going on and a lot of unrest. And also you're home. Whereas that may have been occurring prior to that. You just weren't home to witness it. So which do you think? Do you think it was more of an influence of the times we were going through, or the fact that people were actually there to experience it?
I think there was the fact, well, there was a slight combination of many factors going on there. And I think people were being activated. And I think they were being allowed to activate in a state which we had disconnected from for quite some time. And, it was a very strange thing to observe and watch happen. So, there may be something in it, but whenever I wrote the book, The Influence, which looked at this aspect of how this energy was attaching to people, not going into where it was coming from or anything, it just dealt with attachments, how to identify them, and what the attachments were doing to us on a biological level, and how we could reverse that and get our balance back. Because this darkness, this insidiousness, when it managed to infiltrate, for instance, even within research groups, it ate them from the inside out. And we see this time and time again. The door is open to these things, and then they will digest the groups from the inside out. Ego, depression, isolation, these are all key factors of this particular this energy when it gets accessed. And when I was writing the book at the beginning, I was given this warning, a very distinct warning. And it might tie in with what was going on with people who were saying that their homes suddenly now there's activity in my home. What's going on here? I was given the warning, don't become too bright or they see you. And there's an old, recently there I came across an old saying from Japan: the nail that sticks out gets hammered.
I like that. I'm writing that down. Barry, I need to ask, I mean, quite frankly, I know people can get your books on Amazon, but I'm sure, people like me, maybe, that want to get it autographed by you. You can send me that info after the show if you like. But Amazon, is that where everyone can get the books, or can they go to any bookstore?
There are links there on Amazon. They can pop over to my website at charmstealer.com, or they can find me on Facebook and things like that. The only thing that I would say about signing books and sending them, with the price at the minute, with everything going up in price, it costs an absolute fortune now to send the books to America.
I'll pay it.
Oh, okay.
I'll pay it. All right. Don't worry about it. I mean, literally, it's to the point where I think this is one of those shows that we can honestly say we've actually learned so much. I've literally, I had to get up, get this and start writing down, because I noticed that my co-host was already doing it, because I heard the swivel of her pencil up against paper, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's not fair. I should be doing this too. And so I felt left out. And quite frankly, everything that you've said has been spot on. I agree with 100%, but at the same time, learned a few things along the way, which is really what this show is all about, quite frankly. So Amazon is really the best way to get your books.
Definitely, yeah, and I have to say, if people like just a particular, a story, a fictional story, there's the trilogy there, which really encompasses the fairy realm, spirits, ufology. It pulls it all together, and it's called the Council of Three. In case people are looking for it, we'll show them the cover. You have the
there it is.
Serpents, and that again is on Amazon. And we have of course, I shouldn't forget the good old Banshee, and of course, not forgetting the Deceptions of Gods and Men. That's the latest one.
Yes,
the Deceptions of Gods and Men. So and again, that's on Amazon now. It's also an audiobook. So
is it your voice?
It's not my voice, I'm afraid.
Oh,
I need to use my own voice.
that would have made it even better if it was your voice, because I mean, come on. So I'll be in definite contact with you, because I definitely want an autographed one from you. I'll pay. I don't care. Quite frankly, for those of you. So once again, give us your information as to how people can keep in touch with you through. I know Facebook. Do you have any other social media platforms that people can
I have Twitter. I don't really use Twitter. I never really have, but Facebook would be the primary one for me to contact me on, and through the messenger there. And if anyone has any questions, I'm always there. It may take me a day or two to get back to them, but I will always get back to the messenger.
What's funny is I remember when it was back in the day, MySpace.
Oh yes. I loved MySpace. I thought it was great.
Yeah, but it was never for what we do now. Beth Watson, us Americans have a good accent. Okay. Well, I actually wish I had an Irish or Scottish or British accent, to be honest with you. But that's just me.
Well, speaking of, before we leave, one of our regular viewers, Meg, wanted to make sure that we wish Barry a happy St. Patty's Day.
Yeah.
Because it's coming up on Friday. So she wanted to make sure that we gave you a shout out for that. She's Irish. So she has that date in mind.
Thank you very much. And I hope we get dry weather for it.
Oh, we've had wet weather here in Utah. How about down there in Florida?
We're just now getting rain that we desperately needed. We've been kind of in a drought.
All right. Well, you know what? It happens. But Barry, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure. And for 2 freaking hours, Barry Fitzgerald, we had, this to me felt like classroom. So thank you so much for being on the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome to come back whenever you like.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Okay. Take care now.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Barry Fitz. Hey, it's Vickie.
I always Epic screen. Always.
Yeah, look at you. All right. So this was episode 9, and we are fast approaching episode 10, finally the double digits, and we're looking forward to it. Next week, thank you, Beth, for chiming in. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Mark Anthony, as usual. Thank everyone for chiming in. We appreciate it. Next week, we have a free week to pretty much discuss. And if you want to watch this show and didn't have a chance to watch it, go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, and go to Greetings from Beyond Radio. You will be able to watch everything that we said live. Well, not really live, but recorded.
And if there's something that you want us to talk about next week,
Yes.
Put it in the comment section on YouTube. And we'll
Yes.
try to get to that topic.
Definitely. We'll discuss it, and please be there. And also, real quick, Jen, if you could run through Vickie's information if they want to get in contact with Vickie as well for readings. Vickie's by reading. Or wait,
Readings by Vickie.
I did it backwards. Wow. Okay. Readings by Vickie. And right there, scrolling underneath, is all that information. And she is ready to help. And she's good at what she does. I wouldn't recommend her if she wasn't. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And as usual, I thank you from the bottom of my heart and Vickie's. We're fast approaching number 10. I'm excited. But we have so many more people coming on. And I'm looking forward to it. And I think someone's still in the chat room by the name of Beth Watson, which may be coming very, very soon onto our show. But I have a surprise for Beth. It's called a surprise, honey. You won't know until it is there. So, as I always end every single show, live life. Don't let life live you. And peace, be still. Till next week.